Chapter 12. The Festival of the Blazing Sun. Nivara skipped down the road. She was certainly happy that Rowan was alive, but upset that she could not tell Vasily about how her friend had died and come back to life. Rowan made them all swear to secrecy. Of course they would have to tell Elvire and Van Richten, since they saw her die. Nivara also convinced Rowan that Gostomir had to know. But that was where Rowan drew the line. If anyone else was to find out Rowan was a Dhampir, Rowan would be the one to tell them. Nivara had to trust that Rowan would tell Vasily eventually. But in the meantime, Nivara hated keeping secrets. "This must be it," Nivara said, stopping at a townhouse on the east side of Vallaki. It was less run down than most. Nivara had left the inn after dinner, making sure to bathe and wear something attractive, which happened to be her blue dress. "Nivara, come in," Vasily said. She followed him to a cozy parlor room. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a plate of hors d'oeuvres sat on a low marble table by a red sofa. "Have a seat," said Vasily, offering her a glass of wine. "I'm surprised you still wanted to come. After I heard about the coffin shop, I assumed you must be exhausted." Nivara collapsed on the sofa, acknowledging the weight of her fatigue. "I couldn't cancel on you again." She took the glass and sipped. Vasily sat down beside her and brushed his gentle hand over a scratch on her neck. "Tell me what happened." She told him, leaving out the part about Rowan dying. She wanted to tell the whole story with dramatic flair, but she kept yawning and accidentally skipping details. "I'm sorry, I'm not doing the battle justice." "Sounds like you really kicked ass." "We did. It was crazy, though." She ate a cheese slice from the table. "Oh, look what I picked up." She pulled out her mirror. "You had a great idea getting one of these, so I thought I should get one too." Nivara turned the mirror at herself, and casually made sure her teeth were clean. "Yeah, I suppose you really need one now," he said. Nivara stowed the mirror back in her pack, making sure not to disturb a sleeping Herkomoid. "I got it at the Baron's house. Speaking of the Baron, Henry and I have been thinking. Is there anyone in Vallaki who could take the Baron's place as burgomaster?" Vasily put a hand on his well-trimmed beard. "Say, that's a bold idea. Lady Wachter would be a good candidate. She has noble blood, and would be a good leader, I think." "Father Lucian mentioned her," Nivara yawned. "Anyway, we can talk about politics later. How have you been? Working on your novels?" "A little. Would you like to see?" "Sure." Nivara ate more cheese and a few minced tarts, as Vasily handed her a couple pages of his latest manuscript. She skimmed through a scandalous scene about two young lovers in bed. The man begged his beloved to leave her tyrannical parents and elope with him. He lamented that her narrow-minded family could not accept him because he was a vampire. "I know it's not like the classics," Vasily said. "It's interesting," she said. Prose. "I will say, making a vampire the protagonist is a unique twist. Although, if he's supposed to be a sympathetic character, I think he should come across as more loving." "I think he's very romantic. He's pouring his heart out in a very intimate scene." "There's a difference between romance and love," Nivara said. "Of course the two can overlap, but love is deeper. It goes beyond infatuation or feelings of desire. Love is immovable. It becomes part of your very being. Gostomir once told me, love is like water. You need it to live." Vasily reached for a quill and parchment. "That's great, Nivara. How did you say that? Love is immovable. Like water? Say it again." Nivara repeated herself, unsure that Vasily understood what she had really meant. After jotting down a few notes, The author put his arm around Navara's shoulders, pulling her close. "Tell me about Gostomir," he said. "Are you going to summon him tonight? I'd really like to meet him." Navara laced her fingers in one of Vasili's hands. "He won't show up. You're here. He never shows himself when anyone else is around." "You should try anyway. I think it would be fascinating to see a real live fae." "I can try, but he's a skittish one." Navara took out her candle and lit it. The flame flickered for a whole minute, but Gostomir did not appear. "Oh well," Vasili said, and stroked Navara's hair, brushing the green-tipped ends. "You're fascinating enough without him." Navara sighed. "Too bad. I've been meaning to ask him to teach me to fly." She rested her head on Vasili's chest, her thoughts turning to the future. "You know what I'm going to do once all this Barovia business is over? I'm going to travel the world." "Really? I'd love to do that too." "You would?" For some reason, Navara had assumed Vasili was not the type of person to go adventuring. Maybe it was due to his lack of interest in magic or fighting. "I'd love to get out of here and see the world," he said. "I'd travel to grand cities on the coast, look out on the endless ocean, and fathom how the world is so much more than this parochial backwater." He stared into the fire with longing. "I feel like I've been cooped up in this valley." "Poor Vasili. I can't imagine how depressing it is growing up in Barovia." She nestled her nose into his neck, smelling the pleasant fragrance of an alluring cologne. "I'd like to show you Harrington. But then there's Waterdeep and Paris. They say that every humanoid race in Draconia can be found in the great city of Waterdeep." Vasili cupped her head in his hands and kissed her. Navara kissed him back. The rest of the evening was lost in embraces, tender caresses, and passionate kissing. Vasili never pushed Navara beyond what she wanted to do. Although she would have liked to go on kissing him through the night, she wanted to take things slow, and she was exhausted. Fatigue won over passion, and Navara fell asleep, wrapped in Vasili's arms. The day was dark, and thunder rumbled in the distance. It was the day of the festival of the blazing sun, and Navara met the others in the town square. She was glad to see the stocks empty. After being dubbed sheriff, Henry had made sure that all the unhappy prisoners were released. "You feeling okay, Rowan?" Navara asked when she saw the haggard-looking druid. Rowan's bloodshot eyes gave away that her nightmares persisted. Even her dusky skin looked pale on her thin face. Rowan sighed. "I'm just happy that you all didn't abandon me." "We could never have done that." "It's you that has to put up with us," Henry said, watching a man run frantically from one side of the square to the other, a long gray streamer trailing behind him. "What's that fellow doing?" They walked over to him. He was round, wore a jester's outfit, and carried a monkey on his shoulders. "Excuse me," Henry said to the man.
"Hello! Sorry, no time to chat. The festival starts at noon, and if I don't get this square decorated, the burgomaster will have my hide."
The man spoke with a thick accent.
"You must be Gadov Blinsky,"
Navara said. She eyed the grey streamers in his hands.
"The Baron told us to tell you that he wants yellow banners for the festival."
Herkomoid peered out from Navara's hair and growled at the monkey.
"Yellow!"
he exclaimed, grabbing the jester's hat.
"I don't have any other colors. I've told that maniac already."
He ran to his wagon and fished out a bucket and a small pouch, then went to the well at the heart of the square and filled his bucket with water. Henry and the others followed him. "Blinsky," Henry said, "we need to ask you a few questions about your dolls."
"Yes?"
he said, dumping the contents of the pouch, a yellow powder, into the bucket.
In the house of Blinsky, happiness and smiles can be bought at bargain prices. Perhaps you know a little child in need of joy, a little toy for a girl or boy.
It seemed to be a well-rehearsed speech. No, we don't need any toys, Henry said. We've come to ask you questions about the dolls you made for Isaac Strasny. Blinsky used a stick to mix the powder and water, turning it the color of unhealthy urine. The toymaker shivered.
That sheriff abused me to no end, forcing me to make dolls for him every month, and he never even paid.
How did he force you? Irina asked.
Blinsky blinked at her, as if noticing Irina for the first time.
You're the girl. I've done countless dolls to look just like you, all for that sheriff. He said he had dreams of a red-haired beauty. He would describe her in great detail and told me if I didn't make these dolls look just like her, he'd burn down my shop.
He threatened you, Henry said.
He tormented me, and I'm not the only one. At least I wasn't put in the stocks or imprisoned in the Baron's house. My friend Udo was taken to the Baron's by Isaac 7 days ago, and no one has seen him since.
Henry frowned. We can investigate your friend's disappearance. I'm the new sheriff now. It seems Isaac got away with many criminal acts under the Baron's watch. But things are going to be different around here. Blinsky dunked one of the thick gray streamers into his bucket.
I wanted to save this dye for my toys. It had a touch of magic in it, too. But if the Baron wants yellow beaners, he'll get yellow beaners.
But when the toymaker pulled the streamer out with his stick, the cloth was colored a sickly green.
This is what happens when I'm rushed.
As noon drew near, the square filled with people conveying a general lack of amusement. Neither Henry nor Navarra took the time to intrude at anyone's doorstep, or to badger them about attending as the Baron had wanted. Instead, they surveyed the growing crowd and watched Blinsky hang his streamers around the square. A few blackish-green drops splattered on people as they walked under the odious decorations.
Gah!
A man said, wiping the yuck from his face.
I think a bird just crapped in my eye.
By noon, the square was packed with disgruntled townsfolk. The weary people looked on as the Baron and Baroness arrived at the podium, accompanied by servants and guards.
He's going to do his joke reading,
said a woman who approached Henry and the others. She was a handsome lady in noble dress.
He does it every festival.
Henry bowed politely. I can't say I'm looking forward to it. I'm Sir Henry Gibson.
Lady Fiona Voctor, she said of herself. I hear that the four of you are now the force in town. I would be most obliged if all of you came to my house for dinner this evening.
We would be delighted,
Navarra said. Henry, Rowan, and Irina agreed.
Is it true that you don't like the Baron?
Navarra asked. Lady Voctor raised a pencil-thin eyebrow.
Not many people do. I myself would rather serve the devil than a madman. But it's imprudent to talk politics at such a public setting. How about we discuss things over dinner? Until then...
She curtsied and disappeared into the crowd.
I see Vasily.
Navarra waved to him.
He's going to show me around. Anyone want to join?
People of Valaki,
the Baron addressed the crowd.
Welcome to the Festival of the Blazing Sun.
There was a smattering of half-hearted clapping.
In a moment we will take a victorious march to the stockyard, where we will have a symbolic demonstration of the sun's power over evil. First, I would like to introduce you to your new sheriff, Sir Henry Gibson.
This announcement met with a more enthusiastic round of applause.
Yes, I can assure you that he will enforce the law with no less enthusiasm than Isaac did. Regarding the deaths of Father Lucian and the altar boy Yeska, they brought ruin upon themselves by their own unhappiness. Now that our pessimistic priest is gone, malcontents and misfits can no longer take refuge at the church. But now it's time for some cheer.
Isn't he going to mention what we did?
Navara questioned. Henry clenched his fists, disgusted at the Baron's mischaracterization of the father. But the Baron merely cleared his throat and took out a handful of papers.
Here we go. This is guaranteed to uplift even the most pathetic persons. Why should you make a sword out of cheddar cheese?
He paused.
Because it's extra sharp.
He chuckled and looked around at his audience. The townspeople collectively forced a laugh. He looked back at his paper.
What do you call a Vistana who works at a bank?
He peered over his glasses.
A fortune-teller!
He laughed again.
Why was everyone in the army tired? Because there were too many sleepless nights.
Is it normal for him to go on like this? Irina asked Vasily.
Oh, it gets better, Vasily said. One year, he had a festival in the middle of a blizzard. He said that if we were all together, everyone's happiness would blow away the storm. He went on reciting jokes as the temperature dropped. A few people lost toes to frostbite.
Navara, Irina, and Rowan shared a look of disgust, wrinkling their noses. Vasily continued.
Another time, he held a 10-day-long harvest festival. Not a festival to celebrate the completion of the harvest, mind you, but a mandatory festival in the middle of harvest season. Anyone caught working in the fields instead of attending was hanged. Grain rotted on the stalks. People starved that year.
Because it wanted to get to the other side.
The Baron held his fat stomach and laughed for a long time before starting the next joke.
What is the most cutting-edge technology? An axe! Ha ha ha!
While the Baron continued his unremitting litany of jokes, an uproar from the Martikovs' wine cart caught Henry's attention. He pushed through the crowd to see a mob of angry people shaking their fists at Erwin. One man shouted,
This stinking festival has gone from bad to worse.
Another man yelled,
The Baron will hear about this.
What's going on? Henry asked Erwin. The Baron's voice sounded in the background.
Hello, Henry,
the innkeeper said over the shouting.
We've just run out of wine.
The festival's barely started, another man said.
I'm sorry, but you'll have to find your refreshments at the brewer's stand.
Erwin pointed to a ramshackle stall at the edge of the square.
That stuff tastes like shit,
a woman hollered. The Baron looked over his shoulder in their direction. A stout man cursed and threw a stone at the Martikovs' cart. Henry took an aggressive step toward him, and the man cowered like a frightened dog. If Isaac were still sheriff, no doubt he would have beaten the unruly man to a pulp. Calm down, everyone, Henry said with authority. Then to Erwin, Don't you have any more wine back at the inn?
No, our shipment from the winery never came.
Henry addressed the people standing near. Since you all love Mr. Martikov's wine so much, I hope you will show him some respect and listen to what he says. The sullen mob faded back into the crowd as the Baron continued talking. The day dragged on, and the skies grew darker. When the Baron had finally finished, a servant brought his horse to the podium. 3 people helped the Baron mount, and when he was situated in his saddle, he waved his hand. Children dressed as drab flowers were ushered to walk at the front of the procession. Once assembled, the entire town marched, and together they trudged through the muddy streets to the Arasek stockyard. When they arrived, the procession parted for a group of men and women carrying a 10-foot diameter wicker ball. The ball was hoisted and hung from the marquee of the coffin shop, where the townsfolk took turns splashing it with oil. Before the wicker sun could be set ablaze, however, the sky tore open in a sudden downpour.
"Never fear, all will be well," cried the burgomaster,
brandishing a sputtering torch.
"All will be well."
He marched defiantly through the rain toward the wicker ball, only to have his torch go out as he thrust it into the sphere. Then, clearly audible above the sound of falling rain, Baron Volachevich let out the longest, loudest fart Henry had ever heard. A singular laugh erupted from the crowd, drawing the burgomaster's fiery gaze, as well as gasps from the townsfolk. Rain plastered the baron's stringy hair to his red face. The man who had made the outburst was one of the baron's own guards.
"You think that's funny? I'll show you what's funny," the baron yelled. "Guards, tie him up and attach him to this."
He indicated the rings on the cantle of his saddle. Then he mounted his horse, this time refusing any help from his servants. After struggling into his seat, he glared at the offender.
"This will give you something to laugh about. I want everyone to see this comedian learn a lesson."
"Please, my lord, I didn't mean to commit a crime,"
the man pleaded as his comrades bound his hands and tied the rope to the saddle. "Burgomaster!" Henry shouted over the rain. "You can't drag a man through the streets for a simple misdemeanor."
"I can and I will. Know your place, Sheriff."
"I'm urging you to rethink this." The accused man struggled in his restraints, begging for mercy. Navarra ran up to the baron.
"Please, Burgomaster, you don't want to do this."
Rowan snuck up behind the baron's horse and cut the rope, releasing the guard without being noticed, then gave a nod to Navarra. Navarra thought about using a simple charm spell, but remembered how much it upset Irina. Instead, she would try a different kind of magic.
"Baron, you must release this man or else suffer the consequences," Navarra said. "I have powerful friends, and you wouldn't want to anger them."
She whispered the arcane words, and an illusion formed in the mind of the baron that only he could see. Stepping out from behind Navarra was Strahd von Zarevich. From the long dark hair hanging below his shoulders to the piercing blood-red eyes set in a pale face, the imaginary Strahd looked every bit like the real one. The baron's face drained of color. The illusory vampire put its hand on Navarra's shoulder. "I would listen to her if I were you," it said in Strahd's voice. The burgomaster's eyes bulged.
"It can't be. Navarra's my deputy. She killed the vampires."
"All according to my plan." The fake Strahd smiled. "Your deputy really works for me." Without saying another word, the baron spurred his horse into a gallop and took off into the rain. People in the crowd tried to make way for the erratic rider, but some were not fast enough. A small boy fell to the ground, the baron's horse trampling him in the mud. Screams erupted, and people circled around the fallen child. "Murderer!" someone shouted after the baron. But the burgomaster was gone. Henry ran to the boy, placing his hands on the child's broken body. "Come on," he said, his hands shaking as the light coming from them grew brighter and brighter. A shining nimbus surrounded the child, and slowly the cracked bones and torn flesh became whole again. The child's mother and father held their son in a tearful embrace.
"Thank you, the mother cried. "Morning, Lord bless you, Sir Henry."
Vasily walked up behind Navarra, putting his hand on her shoulder. "What did you do to the baron?"
"I just showed him an illusion of Strahd to make him think the vampire was right here at the festival."
Vasily laughed, unable to control his amusement. "Wow!
Is that all?"
Not a single person waited for the Baron's return. Lady Petrovna was the first to flee, hanging her head in shame. Every last festival-goer scattered, splattering mud as they went. Navara and the others trudged through the downpour to Vasili's apartment to dry off. It was closer than the Blue Water Inn. Besides, Vasili told them he had also been invited to Lady Wachtter's dinner that evening. After they had all changed into housecoats and set their wet garments to dry by the fire, Henry took Navara aside. "We need a new burgomaster," he said.
"I know," said Navara. "Vasili told me he thinks Lady Wachter would be good for the position."
"I'm sure she would be better than Baron Vlachovich. But I was talking to some people in town, including Mr. Erwin Mardukov. Many said they would take her over the Baron, but they also say she is sympathetic to Strahd."
"Really? I find it hard to believe that anyone could sympathize with that monster."
"The woman did say she would rather serve the devil than a madman." Navara crossed her arms.
"That's not good. But she's the only person who could oppose the Baron."
"I was thinking of someone else," Henry said, watching Navara's reaction. "What do you think of asking Vasili?" Navara started.
"I hadn't thought of that."
"He's a nobleman. Said his family goes back generations. He could have a valid claim to the baronial title."
"Yes."
"Since you've gotten to know him, do you think he'd make a good leader?"
"Oh, I definitely think so. He has potential, although I do think he's a little naive. But I'm sure, with the right push, he could make a fine burgomaster."
Before they left for Lady Wachtter's house, Henry proposed the idea to Vasili. "Well, I'll be," Vasili said in surprise. He shook Henry's hand and told him how honored he was for being asked. "I will do my utmost to help the people of Vallaki. I'd rebuild the orphanage, for one, replace the old coffin shop. Above all, no more festivals, at least not as frequently. I have a list of ideas. Of course it will take time, but eventually this town could recover from years of unhappiness."
"It's ironic," Navara said. "All the Baron says he wants is for people to be happy, but all he does is cause misery."
Lady Fiona greeted the five of them in the dining hall of Wachter House.
"Welcome, friends,"
she said. She wore a high-collared dress and heavy eyeshadow. A butler waited on them as they seated themselves at a richly laden table. Though the silverware was tarnished and the plates were chipped, the whole affair seemed to recall a time of bygone sublimity.
"I'm glad you've come,"
Lady Wachter said, as the butler brought out the first course. He ladled hot pumpkin soup into each person's bowl.
"I will get straight to the point," she said. "I've invited you all here because there has been a shift in power. Baron Vargas Vlachovich recklessly employed a knavish brute, whom he released on the town like a plague. You put a stop to that, and now you have become the enforcers. I heard about what you did at the coffin shop, and I saw how you handled yourselves at the festival."
She gave a modest clap.
"I'm sure you're aware of the burgomaster's gross negligence and unbalanced state of mind."
She hailed a servant who brought her a thick scroll. She unrolled the parchment until its lower folios trailed on the floor.
"This is the genealogy of the Wachter family," she said. "I will demonstrate with irrefutable logic that I have a better claim to the baronial title than Vargas. As you can see,"
she pointed to a name on the diagram,
"my late husband's great-grandfather was Radogild Vlachovich, the direct descendant of Boris Vlachovich, the founder of the city. Radogild married Mindora Stefanova. She gave birth to 2 children, an elder daughter, Isabella, and a younger son, Gorik. Later I will elaborate questions of Gorik's legitimacy, but for now let me say that there are many. Nevertheless, you can see that through the principle of primogeniture, the baronial title should have passed to Isabella and her children by Sir Methodius Voctor. Now, Vargas and his ancestors have attempted to obfuscate the matter by appealing to—
I don't mean to be rude. Henry stopped her from what was shaping up to be a long-winded speech. But we want to overthrow the Baron just as much as you do.
Oh, in that case.
She rolled up the scroll and handed it back to her servant.
We know that the Baron isn't fit to lead the people, Navarra said. His megalomania is ruining this town. He's ruined more than that, I'm afraid, said Lady Voctor with disdain. My daughter Stella has been stark raving mad for over a year because of Vargas' malicious son. Victor? Navarra asked. Yes, Victor Volokovich. That boorish boy was engaged to marry Stella. That was until he made her go insane. How could he do that? Navarra asked in disbelief. Magic, my dear. Magic in the hands of a juvenile delinquent. Now Stella never wants to leave her room. I fear she never will.
I'm sorry to hear that, Henry said. Lady Fiona nodded in appreciation.
I'm glad you can all see the Volokovich family for what they are, a brood of incompetent buffoons.
Lady Voctor, Henry said, after swallowing a bite of the second course, boiled ham with potatoes and cabbage. I hope you don't think us too impertinent, but we'd like to suggest Vasily von Holtz as the new burgomaster. Lady Voctor's countenance darkened with skepticism, but she quickly replaced it with a sly smile. Ah, young Vasily. She nodded in his direction. His family goes all the way back to the war. His great-great-great-great-grandfather, Vasily von Holtz the Elder, was a servant of Strahd von Zarevich in those days. You didn't tell me you had such terrible ancestors, Navarra said, nudging Vasily's arm. I think you would make a fine burgomaster, Vasily, Lady Voctor said, especially if you had the right support and guiding counsel. I could provide that support, that counsel. Thank you, milady, Vasily said in earnest. How do we know you'd be the right influence? Rowan spoke for the first time. You said yourself you would rather serve the devil than a madman. Are you saying you would be willing to serve the devil's Strahd? Lady Voctor dabbed her mouth with a napkin and stared Rowan in the eyes. Strahd is a monster, yes, but he is also a man of honour, and he does not lightly forgive offences against his honour. A wise person must show a healthy respect for the lord of the land, who brings rewards to his allies and ruin to his enemies. Every day this town fails to pay him the homage he deserves as count is another day we risk incurring his retribution. He has poured out his wrath to punish much lesser offences than Vargas's petulant defiance. Entire towns have been wiped from the face of the earth at his command. What can we do against such power? I would never wish that fate on my own hometown. I'm sure Vasily would agree. As burgomaster, Vasily will need to protect every good citizen of Vallaki. And if that means bending a knee to Strahd von Zarevich, then so be it. They did not talk further about the ethics of serving a vampire overlord. That was a question for another time. But they all agreed that the Mad Baron's tyranny needed to end. There in the dining hall of Voctor House, they devised a plan to depose the burgomaster and replace him with Vasily. Henry would need to convince him to throw another festival within a few days, but this task should not prove too difficult. After they finished the last course of the meal, hot plum pudding, Henry put his spoon down and asked Lady Voctor where Stella's bedroom was. "If you'll allow me," he said, "I'd like to see your daughter. I think I can help her."